Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Kendra Larson, and I'm the Archer Gallery Director and Clark Arts Talk Coordinator. Today we have Holly Hudson as our guest. Very exciting. Um, Holly Hudson was born in 1975 in Ketchikan, Alaska. She received her BA in drawing and painting from Fairhaven College, Western Washington University in 1999. She then studied figurative drawing and painting at the
Yes.
Aristides,
Yes, you got it.
yeah, Classical Atelier from 2002 to 2005. Hudson went on to obtain her MFA in painting from the New York Academy of Art in 2010. She received several scholarships, including the Robert Dezordo Scholarship and
Mhm.
the Academic Excellence Scholarships from NYAA. She was honored to be a nominee for the Dedalus Foundation Fellowship and was also selected to be an artist in residence at Parsons, Altos de Chavanne,
Yeah.
um, Dominican Republic, as well as artist in residence at Eden Rock Gallery, St. Bart's, French West Indies. Most recently, Hudson was selected to participate in the Museum of Northwest Art's first annual Ceramic Invitational. She has shown her work in Alaska, Washington State, and New York City. She currently lives and works in Bellingham, Washington. So Holly will share her work today, as well as talk about her inspirations and process, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions. Does that sound good? All right, let's welcome Holly Hudson.
Thank you. All right. I will talk as loudly as I can, and if you guys can't hear me, let me know, okay?
Oh yes, and I will make you a co-host so you can share your screen.
Oh, great. Perfect. Um, and I'm hoping that this is pretty easy for me to share here. Well, thanks for having me today. I'm loving looking at your classroom and seeing what you guys are working on in the back. Um, and the figurative piece right there in the foreground. Super exciting.
That's yours, yeah.
Um, what's that?
No, it's
Yeah.
Anna's. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Oh, nice. Um, so as Kendra was saying, I'm from Alaska. Originally, I moved down to Washington State when I was probably about 12 years old, here to Bellingham, and then ended up going to school here at Fairhaven College, which is part of Western Washington University. And the great thing about about Fairhaven College is that you get to design your own curriculum. So there was a lot of freedom in that, and I studied with a lot. What was awesome about that is I went and studied with artists within the community, and I got credit for it. So, I had a lot of varied interests artistically. So I kind of got to work with these different people like a little magpie and then put them all together into a format that I was interested in. So that was a really great, if you're pretty self-directed, that's a great way to learn. Um, and then I moved to Seattle and I was really interested in super classical painting and drawing, figurative work. So I went to the Gage Academy and I was at the Aristides Atelier. Some of you may have heard of it. I don't know if you have or not. But super, super classical French academic style stuff. Um, I learned a ton. But I did come to a point where I was like, okay, how can I take all of this technical stuff I've learned and make it into my own thing versus doing, master studies for the rest of my life, right? Or painting the same bowl of fruit over and over again. So at that point, I kind of left the atelier and spent a couple of years painting, and then decided I wanted to go to New York. And I went to the New York Academy of Art, which they really focus on mostly figurative art. But so they have a lot of skill based. sort of stuff. So you're learning a lot of skills, but there also is a lot of contemporary dialogue going on, and where we fall historically, or within history of what we're trying to say with our work. Um, yes. Anyway, I bring all of that up, and there's a couple things, a couple of different trails I'd like to follow as we talk today, which is I'm assuming there's quite a few of you who are you know starting your studies or in the first couple years of what you're learning. I see some of you nodding your heads. So I kind of wanted to talk about, as I said, I was kind of a magpie. So I went to all of these different programs, and sometimes that was kind of hard because I was like, oh my God, I'm all over the place. Like, what are my inspirations? What am I doing? And I feel like there's a lot of pressure, even when you're, pretty young and just starting out, to be this fully developed artist, to already know what it is you're trying to say. And, a lot of articles of, 30, under 30, and, just this kind of obsession with like youth and just being already this fully developed person artistically. And I don't feel like that happens for everybody, or at least it didn't for me. So it was, just kind of this gleaning of skills as I've moved through life. And that's been awesome because, to be completely cliche, it really is about the journey. And that's what makes art amazing, is when you're, constantly learning. And that's why it never gets old or boring. Um, so yeah, so there's that. And then I also kind of wanted to talk too as we go along about how all of those different things I studied have now brought me kind of to what I'm making today, even though at the time they may have seemed unrelated. So without further ado, will go to my images, and with any luck, I'll be able to share them. Okay, share photos. Okay. Um, so let's see here. I'll kind of start here at the beginning. So I about 8 years ago,
Just to
have
say, Holly, we can't see any pictures right now.
you can't, okay, I'm gonna share this right now. Just one second. I'm selecting images. Okay, just one sec. I have a lot of images, you guys. Um, add. Okay, here we go.
There.
Oh, right. You guys can see.
Yay. That's
Yes.
good.
Awesome. Okay, so I didn't go all the way back. But previous to this, I was making kind of figurative paintings, very loose gestural figurative paintings and oils. And then I had a little girl just about 8 years ago, and I found myself unable to do a lot of studio work because I was caring, for an infant. And then the pandemic happened, and so I was at home, and still caring for her, which is, little kids are pretty time consuming. So anyway, what I ended up doing was collage work, because I figured even if I had like 15 minutes, I could cut out some pictures, and then if I had another 15 minutes, I could glue it all together. So I ended up making these large, so this is life size, and the pieces are glued between layers of resin. So they are kind of slightly three-dimensional, coming off of like a wood panel. So I kind of was doing this collage thing, taking all these things and bringing them together to make human forms. Here's another one. This also is life size. And part of this, so in my studies at the New York Academy, we took a lot of anatomy. And when I moved back to Washington, there was a big windstorm and a tree went over in our yard. And, all the roots were kind of exposed up in the air. And I was looking at it and I was like, oh my God, it looks exactly like the human body, like all of these roots and, um, little bits look just like arteries and veins. And, then the knots in the woods kind of looked like phalanges in our fingers. So I got really interested in how our bodies mimic what's in nature. And, right now that there's I think it's really important to remember that we aren't outside of nature, that we're in nature and nature is in us. Um, and if one thing goes down, you know, we're connected and it all follows. Am I making sense? Yes, no?
Yes.
Good. All right. And there it is, a little close up. Here is a bear that I made. This one was called Ursa Major. And what I have in the background showing here is once again how things repeat within nature. So I have sea urchins and sea stars and stuff as kind of like showing how in the sky, these forms that we see are repeated throughout nature. The eyes and the butter, and the big moth reflecting eyes within nature as well. So I started to struggle a little bit with resin. I don't know if any of you guys have ever worked with resin, but it's, liquid and then dries. But what I started struggling with is that it can yellow over time. And if you don't do it just right, you have bubbles, you have imperfections, and also it's plastic. So I was kind of like, here I am making these pieces about human nature and nature, and I'm using plastic. So I decided to start using specimen pins and pinning these images I've cut out into, into a substrate and then putting them in kind of like a shadow box. So they're really fun because they have these cast shadows. And then there's also that sort of double meaning between, specimens. You have a human skull here, like, are we the specimen? Here is a side view, so you can kind of see. So I could do them at different, kind of like the resin. I could do them at different depths and create different forms with them. So this is kind of a theme that came back to me over and over again. When I was a kid in Alaska, I went to Catholic school, but I also was kind of surrounded by, like the Tlingit and Haida art. And my dad carves in the Tlingit tradition. We are not Native American, but he was taught by the Tlingit carvers. Because he was an art teacher and he actually shared that with his students because there were, he had First Nations kids in his classes and he was like, this is important. You guys should learn how to do this. So he had the carvers come in and teach him and the students how to do it. And then they presented him with a set of knives. And so he's carved in that tradition. Anyhow, there's a point to my story. And the point is I had this, kind of strange upbringing with this clash between Western religious ideologies and then, creation stories and this from the people I was surrounded by, and the totems and, the longhouses and the potlatches and stuff. And one thing I found very interesting, for example, in the story of Adam and Eve, God takes mud and creates Adam out of mud. And in the creation stories of the Tlingit, Raven is the creator, and he takes mud and creates all the animals out of mud. So I got super interested in comparative mythologies, especially creation stories. And when I started researching this, what I found specifically with creation myths was there was the same story that occurred over and over and over again, and it was the world tree or the tree of life. And almost every single culture has this tree of life story. And usually what this tree of life sort of symbolizes for every culture is a source of wisdom about the physical and supernatural worlds and how this tree kind of spans those two worlds. So there are often common themes. There's obviously the tree, there's usually women, there's serpents in almost all these stories. So in Christianity, obviously, there's Adam and Eve, there's the tree, there's the serpent, there's forbidden knowledge. It's a tree of knowledge. It's forbidden. They're not supposed to eat it. So in ancient Greece, there was also a story about Hera, who was, I think, the queen of the gods. So she had a sacred garden that contained a sacred tree that had forbidden fruit. So in order to protect this tree, she had a bunch of nymphs, these young women who were supposed to protect this tree. And they stole the fruit and they ate it. So she got rid of them and brought in a serpent to protect the tree. So super fascinating, right? Because, right now, especially politically, we have, these ideas that we're all very separate from one another. And, Christianity is the only way, and theirs are the only true stories. And I don't know, I think that gets really dangerous when you start othering everybody. And, the dogma of only my story is right, your story is wrong. And I guess what I'm kind of interested in is how we have these like perceived differences that further othering. But really what it is, when you look at these myths, is these collective experiences and, between cultures. So I try to kind of make some of these pieces, and especially this tree of life comes up over and over again. So I have in here the women's legs. I have a serpent. You can kind of see it in there. I'll try to make it bigger so you guys can see. Let me see. And then, oh, that's a painting. That's another painting. Anyhow, I have some images of the tree of life again, but am I making sense, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So as you go back through history, there's the Natchez people of Mississippi believed a giant cedar joined the heavens and the earth and the underworld, same sort of thing. In Buddhism, you have the tree of knowledge, which is the Bodhi tree. You have the tree of Jesse, a visual representation of Jesus' family tree, Jesse, and then Mary, and then the flower is Jesus. And then even prior to all of this, in very ancient Hebrew culture, Yahweh had a wife named Asherah. So their supreme God had at one point a female counterpart. Her name was Asherah, and they had groves. She had a sacred tree. And so they had groves that were all trees, and they were considered to have sacred knowledge. When it went to kind of more of a, just kind of this patriarchal thing, they got rid of these groves. Anyway, I just find that really interesting that there are all of these connections. So just a quick detour into paintings. I also make paintings. These are more recent. Like I said, this will all make sense. There's a lot of, you can see all of these sort of wildflowers in the background. And then animals. This is a boar I painted with that same sort of wildflower background. A snake in the grass. Oh my God, now I can't remember his name. Anyway, a couple of years ago, I was painting and collaging, and I was having kind of a hard time. I was unhappy with kind of how my work was going. I felt really stuck. So I thought, okay, I'll take a ceramics class. And because I have a bunch of friends who are potters. And so I took a ceramics class, and I was just like, oh, well, I guess I'm a ceramicist now. Like I just kind of got obsessed. And so I started making things, I guess, in, sculptures in the round. And then I started making these low relief sculptures that kind of, hang on the wall in separate pieces. So part of this, to get back, to sort of the technical stuff, I don't have a huge kiln. So part of this is there's two things that are really great about this is that I can make these in separate pieces and I can arrange them in any way I like. They have any number of different arrangements. And then each piece, I don't start out with like a whole completed idea in my mind. Because often I have found over the years, if I have an idea that's too strict, it often doesn't turn out if there's no room to play a little bit in there or to change my mind. So what's kind of fun about this is that I'll come up with sort of an idea, and one piece will inform the next piece, and that piece informs the next piece. So it kind of turns into this organic creative experience, which is really fun for me. And then I get to make, connections that maybe wouldn't otherwise have been made if I had completely thought every part out. So this sort of lets me, I guess the beauty in having restrictions with the size of my kiln is that I can, I can play, and it also makes me be a little more creative with how I deal with those size restrictions. So that was one of the first pieces that I made that was kind of that low relief sculpture. Here's a little detail. This is all porcelain. I love porcelain. Just the amount of detail you can get in it. It is a lot trickier. I don't know if you guys are working with porcelain at all. It's tricky because it has almost no grog in it. So there's no grit. It's just purely smooth. So it shrinks a lot more, which can really lead to cracking. But I've been pretty fortunate thus far with the cracking aspect. I'm going to try to speed this up because I'm just yammering on and on. So this is a sculpture in Central Park in New York City that I took a picture of years ago. And just kind of loved that low relief feeling, almost like wallpaper coming off the wall, right? The wind just blew my door open. Hang on 1 second. Um, anyhow, what that kind of started getting me thinking about was how I could make a landscape on a flat surface, um, and make it sort of dimensional. Also, I want to come back to how I was saying earlier, how you might start one thing and then, it informs your work as you go on. So I was making this sort of thing in collage, right? And I was kind of trying to make it three-dimensional by having it suspended in those layers of resin. And I think now, like all along, because I also paint very thickly, I think I just wanted to be three-dimensional, but I didn't know it. So it was really that, me just kind of taking a chance and being like, oh, I'm going to take a ceramics class just to kind of get out of my funk or whatever. And it just opened up a whole new world. Also, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, you're doing ceramics now? I thought you were a painter. I thought you just did collage. Or I thought, and that's at like, I was 47 that was 3 years ago. So I guess also don't be afraid to, you don't always have to stay in your lane. You can try different things. Even if you're, sort of established. Although I'm getting there. Anyway, so this is in its green state. So then I just started, I kind of went crazy and it was just ceramics all day, every day. And so once again, kind of going back to that topic of the sacred feminine, being a source of life, it's growing out of her, kind of like growing out of the feet. Here it is from the other side. And this is mixed with like embossed metal. This is a vase that I called the Big Bad Wolf. Really love making all of those little bits, coming off of him to kind of show sort of movement, within the hair. And then this like comical large tongue, because, in the story, it's always like, oh, what big teeth you have. Oh, what big eyes you have. Yeah, I think this is the side there. Kind of playing around with just selectively using color added to the porcelain. With porcelain, it seems, like the material itself is so beautiful and translucent. I don't want to add too much color because then you kind of lose that translucency. Some masks. This is also kind of drawn from art history or from Greek mythology. These are women or kind of like not totally a creation story, but this is the Morai, which are the three weavers. So there's one that weaves the thread of life, there's one that measures it, and there's one that cuts the thread of life. This originally had 6 hands going around it, and I broke them. So there you are. Let's see here. Here's a little part kind of venturing into pieces that can kind of, I made this with a slump mold. So, it's kind of rounded, and then I attached all the different pieces to it. So this one can sit on a table or it can hang on the wall. Anyway, here's that tree of life again from an old weaving. I believe that is the tree of Jesse. So you can see here's this tree, you know, a very literal representation of a tree, or a family tree, or a tree of life. This was the piece I made for the Northwest, or the Museum of Northwest Art. This is also kind of along that same theme that I was making with the collage of the legs sprouting the tree. Um, I had had a show, I guess about a year before at Smith and Valley, which is in a small town called Edison, but it's a great little gallery. And I had made a wall piece, and the director of the museum saw it and said, "Hey, I understand that you just started doing ceramics. I am having a ceramics invitational, and I'd like you to be part of it." And I was like, "Oh, that's super exciting. I'm really honored." And he said, "Well, come look at the museum." And I thought, "Oh, he'll want like a small piece," but he was like, "Do you want this 26-foot long wall, or do you want that, 20-foot wall, or which space do you want?" And I didn't have enough work to, fill a 25-foot wall. But I had 4.5 months. And I said, "Hey, I'll take this little alcove area, and I'm going to transform it into what feels like a chapel, or sort of a sacred space." So I painted the background of the walls blue, kind of arched, so it felt like you were kind of looking through some windows, or um, you're on the outside peeking in, or the inside peeking out. And kind of reminiscent of a church. Um, but I kind of once again wanted to show that connection between all these different cultures and religions. So you have the tree of life there, and then on either side, they're kind of, like that Garden of Eden sort of idea with all the different animals in it. This is a picture from below, which kind of shows you the depth. Once again, super fun to make this because it's all separate pieces. I think there were 152 pieces total. And they can be arranged in different ways. Um, but you'll see these common themes. So here is kind of my idea of, on the left, there's the raven with the human hand speaking to what I'm kind of picturing is, Eve in the Garden of Eden. She's emerging from a nest. You can see the serpents below her. And then you can kind of see, there's the hand with the stigmata, sprouting from the tree. Actually, and they're not really, in my mind, it wasn't really blood, it was seeds leaking from her hands. I made the serpent have like 3 heads. I think I have a picture here of that at some point. And that was more of a close-up picture of that. Once again, kind of using some slump molds to make like the basic forms of the head. And then adding to it, using some press molds that I made to make these repetitive, like to make the feathers. But everything is pretty much hand built. I love hand building. I haven't learned how to throw. I don't know if I want to or not. Kind of the beauty of starting over at this point for me in ceramics was like I didn't really know how to do it. So in some ways that allowed me to experiment more. I didn't know all the rules. I took one sculpture class where there was very little instruction. So I kind of had to, just learn all of this stuff on my own by looking at what other people are making and yeah, so it's been kind of fun. Um, Here is a fox. You can see in his mouth that he's holding an egg. In the Tlingit myths where I grew up, there's, Raven brings light to the world by stealing the sun in his mouth. And I was on San Juan Island over here, and a little fox ran by me with an egg in his mouth. And I was like, oh, that's just too perfect. So I decided to make a sculpture of him. This guy is a lion, kind of heavily inspired by some gargoyles from medieval structures. There he is again. Then I just, made all of these little pieces, like I was saying earlier. It was kind of like one thing would kind of lead to the next thing, like, oh, I'm gonna make this flower, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna make a little snail to keep that flower company. This is a woodpecker that was part of kind of this menagerie I made to kind of go in this Garden of Eden. And then this past year, I showed this piece at AMCE in Seattle, which Kendra also shows there as well, her amazing paintings. So this is also, once again, kind of a play on, the serpent in the Garden of Eden. You can kind of see with her, so around the same time as that story was being written, there were Minoan snake goddesses, and I can't help but feel like maybe they were demonizing serpents because, then it kind of pushed the patriarchal agenda of like, oh, women are subservient and bad, and these women who, were essentially snake charmers, snakes being kind of symbolic because they shed their skin of rebirth. And so I kind of wanted to show her with her hands popping out of the ground and sprouting all of these flora and fauna, once again, kind of like that stigmata, but producing beauty and life. You can see her a little bit closer there. And then I just wanted the hand. So I'm going to try to wrap this up real quick because we only have a couple more minutes. These are what I've been working on recently. These are Nootka roses, which grow here. You guys probably have them down there too. They usually grow along the coast. They're native to the Pacific Northwest in Alaska. They're really amazing because they have this kind of microhabitat that protects all of these small creatures that live along the coastline. So larger things can't get at them. So there's these hedges. Once you start looking, they're everywhere. These hedges all along the coastline of thorny Nootka roses, and that's where bees have, do a lot of. They're an early source of food for pollinators early in the spring, and then there's butterflies and moths and deer eat the rose hips throughout the winter. So they're just kind of this incredible microhabitat. There's a close up. Once again, another little sort of landscape, a tiny landscape showing a worm and all sorts of little critters. Kind of got interested in the macro and the micro, so I'm showing these small worlds. This is actually a sconce, so you can put a light behind it. Just started playing with mason stains, mixing that into the porcelain. You know, it's kind of like a powdered stain. So these are just three little things that I made, kind of playing with it. We'll see if it forms into anything larger. There's a spider in a celebration of Halloween. Another plant inspired thing. This isn't, so a lot of the things I make aren't necessarily something that really exists in nature. It's just kind of forms I'm interested in. So walking my dog around the neighborhood and seeing these kind of hanging plants, kind of trying to create a sense of movement with them. So here's one last thing, and then I will stop talking. This is, once again, name escapes me, medieval artist. Something getting back to that idea of religion and things getting lost in translation. So what I find funny about these old pictures of animals from medieval times is that a lot of these people probably just would never ever see a lion, but maybe one person had seen a lion. And then they come back to, you know, the Netherlands and they tell their friends, like, there was this amazing creature, it's called a lion, and this is kind of what it looks like. And so then somebody else might tell their friend, like, oh, my friend saw a lion and this is what it looks like. So you have this ancient game of telephone that occurs, and you start to kind of wonder what got lost in translation. So you have this lion who has a human, if you look at it, it has a human ear. So when you start looking back at these medieval paintings of things, they have all of this anthropomorphizing that occurred. But why I find this interesting and important is that there were probably a number of people who thought this is exactly what a lion looks like. And in the same way, we have kind of this game of telephone and things that have been lost in translation in a Bible that people still, you know, still look to in order to make current judgments on their neighbor. So I think maybe my next show will be, I've been thinking about this, about calling it Lost in Translation, because I'm starting to, here's my lion that I'm working on right now. This is in green state, but I've given it a human hand. I didn't give it a human ear, but I think I'm going to make it half human, half beast. And the whole idea is kind of what I was just talking about what gets lost in translation of what we believe, and how we treat others based on these beliefs that are antiquated. All right, I think I'm pretty much done. And then I'm just working on some of these small, you know, grasses to kind of, once again, show movement. I think that might be it. Oh, that's one of the other ones. Okay. How do I unshare my screen? Oh, stop share. There we go. All right. I hope that no one fell asleep.
That was
That is,
wonderful. Thank you so much, Holly.
no, thank you.
If there's any questions, y'all can chime in, or if you would rather put it in the chat, I'm happy to read them as well.
I bet someone in here has a question. Let me see. Brady? So the question is, what are you currently working on right now?
What am I? Oh, that last piece that I was showing you, with the kind of the head of the lion with the human hand. That's what I'm working on at the moment. Um, Creating like, so honestly, that big piece I made with the tree with all the separate parts, like I had to glue hanging. This is what's interesting, and Lisa's probably just like, duh, but as a painter, you don't have to think about any of that. You don't have to think about whether something's going to stand up or fall apart or how it's going to hang on the wall. So I'm now kind of trying to figure out how to, with that new lion human piece that I'm making, like how can I take all of these pieces and can I glue them to a substrate? How am I going to present this thing, right? So I'm making all of the pieces, and then I'm going to try to figure out how it can all go together, um, and be easier than I mean, I had 152 pieces in that last thing, and I had nails for all of them. And the poor museum was like, "We had to remove all your nails," and hanging it took me like 7 hours. So anyway, I'm working on that, but then also working on how to make it look the way I want it to, how to make have ease of putting this thing all together.
Let me ask a question. Given all this, and that clay is can be so probably like, why? What is it about clay? Why keep working with clay? What about it as a material inspires you to stick with it?
Um, Honestly, I'm like a super sensory driven person. So just having your hands in earth all day feels amazing. I'm sure there are some of you who have that experience where it's like incredibly grounding. And I find it kind of sad, like I teach classes every once in a while, and oftentimes it's like to absolute beginners, and some of them cry because they don't ever get to make anything with their hands. So I think that um, just that sensory experience, that show I was part of at the museum, there I think were 11 or 12 of us who were part of that, and it was all ceramics, and every single person had made something so completely different. So the ability of clay to be have so many incarnations is incredible, right? um, Whether you're making things that stand alone as a sculpture, or things that all go together, or it's just kind of amazing once you start thinking about it. Not that paintings can't have different incarnations, but just clay can take so many forms.
Let me see if there's any other questions in the studio here. Brady, and then Anna.
I was gonna ask, like, if you have any advice for ceramic students who want to keep doing clay outside of class like this, or like people after graduating but don't really know how to, like, I guess keep going with it, I guess.
Did you hear that, Holly?
I didn't get all of that.
The question is, do you have any advice for a ceramic student, like after they graduate, how might they be able to keep working with clay?
Yeah. What's so amazing I have found about the clay community? And I live in a relatively small town. It's like Bellingham's like maybe 100,000 people. We have 3 or 4 clay studios, community studios, and they're all just thriving. So what I have loved is how open people are and inclusive people are in the clay community. How people share information. I just felt like, all the years that I went to school, I was always kind of looking for a mentor, and I didn't really find that in the painting world. But as soon as I started working with clay and started working in a community studio, Um, it was just kind of like everybody was so open and free with their information. And so there's really, it's hard when you get out of school to be self-motivated all the time. Um, I'm obsessive, so it's not that hard for me, but I think it's a lot of people, it's kind of like, oh, I don't have any community. But that's what's awesome about Clay. I'm assuming you guys have a lot of, like in Portland and Vancouver, like a lot of community support.
Yeah, two more just opened in Vancouver in the past
Ah,
month. Yeah.
oh my God, that's awesome. So that's what I would say. And what's really amazing about that is that you have people, um, in those spaces who have so much knowledge and are willing to share it. Like I met this lady right when I started, and she had, she was probably about 80. She had made just about everything. And you could ask her, and she knew the answer. Like she was incredible, and she would share it with you. There was no gatekeeping, and that was really amazing. So I would say definitely look to your community or start something together. When you guys are done, start a group together where you meet every week. That will keep you going.
I think there was another question here, Anna.
Have you been able to make a living off of the art? And if so, how would you recommend going about that?
I'm kind of part-time. So I have a little girl who has some special needs. So I take care of her a lot of the time. Um, Otherwise, I think I've been pretty fortunate in that I have had a good 10 years or so where I've sold a lot of my work online through social media to primarily friends and then word of mouth. So even once again, if you're kind of like, I'm struggling to show work or this gallery doesn't want me, or, like trying to find your place in that world. Once again, I think that really comes down to community. And I'm guessing that a lot of you already have community through Instagram or Facebook or whatever else. But I guess what I would have to say is you don't have to wait for somebody else to say, I pick you and you can be in my gallery in order to show your work. Show it to your friends. Have a little, I hear about this more and more all the time. I haven't been really able to do this because, like I said, I have a little kid and I don't necessarily have the time or space. But I have several friends that have their own, what they call a salon, and they invite their friends over. They have an exhibit in their home and they invite all their friends and they have a party and they sell their work. So that when you're trying to like build a portfolio, um, you know, everything, I'm going to try to relate this. Everything we see in the world that we take for granted as having always been there was once an idea, right? It was somebody's idea. So your idea could be that thing that's established in the future. Once Clark College was considered an idea, and now it's an institution. So don't underestimate, your ability to make something in the world. You can do it. You can do it.
There's one more question in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Let
me see if I can find this.
I think you kind of answered a little bit already, but maybe, I don't know if there's anything else to say. The question is from Yaxi, what has kept you inspired to continue to work with clay over the years?
Well, so I was saying before, I've actually only been working in clay for about 3 years now. But I did have when I was at the New York Academy, we had to take, so I did this class. It was like, it's called écorché, where you build the muscles and bones of the human body out of clay, and you apply it to a skeleton, which is wild. It was super fun if you're a total nerd like me. But so I had some background. Wow, I'm getting off topic. Anyway, I didn't have a lot of experience with clay, and I think that over the years, what's kept me in it the past few years is just like, I think that sort of idea of like just the discovery. Like because I didn't really have all the rules, just playing over and over again and figuring out how to make something work. For me, it's like a big puzzle, and figuring out, and for me, that's just how kind of my mind works and what excites me.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question. Do you have any shows coming up that you want to tell everyone about?
Oh, yeah. So I am in a couple of group shows this next spring and winter. So actually, Kendra, you and I are in a show at AMCE in Seattle. I think it goes up January 30th. So that will be that in Seattle. And then I am part of a group show at Smith and Valley in the spring, which is a flower show. And they asked me to make paintings for that. So I'll be making paintings for that show. And then there is a gallery in Seattle called Studio E. And they have a little window called, so they have their main show space, and then they have a little window in front that's kind of unto itself, and they call it the Vatican. But it's like maybe 3 square feet. So they've asked me to make something for that 3 square feet space and it will be up for about 3 months. So that is going to be another challenge of how to make something that fits within that space. And once again, how do you use the space, right? And how can I make it, exciting? Do I use the ceiling of it, the sides, the walls, instead of just making a freestanding sculpture? So a challenge, and that's one of those things that keeps me inspired too. I don't think I've applied to a couple of other things, but I've yet to hear back. So we will find out.
Well,
That's
thank
all I
you.
got.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank
Awesome.
you. I
Thanks
hope I
for
made
sharing your
sense. I
work.
tend to kind of start talking in circles.
Yeah, thank you so much. And does
Thank you.
anybody else have any other questions
Uh,
from Melina?
We're gonna sign off.
Okay.
Hi.
Thank
okay,
you so
Bellingham.
much, everyone.
Nice to meet you.